Only on Ken's 5 tonight, a San Antonio professor who worked closely with former President Bush opens up about his years at the White House.
Eyewitness News reporter Adi Guajardo spoke with Robert Marbut Jr. as he went down memory lane.
Now, for nearly 3 decades, Marbut held on to pictures, gifts, and memorabilia. But his fondest memories of President Bush, the laughs they shared, and the legacy that helped mold his future. The professor tells me San Antonio marked a special place for the president.
It's a legacy former President George H.W. Bush set in stone right here in San Antonio. In 1992, the North American Free Trade Agreement.
But he also just loved San Antonio. That's why he picked NAFTA to be signed here.
It marked one of Dr. Robert Marbut's many events with Bush throughout his presidency. As the first director of the President's 1,000 Points of Light Foundation, Marbut was tasked with helping honor community service.
He wanted to sort of say, these are the ones that are really doing amazing things, and let's replicate it around the country.
Over the course of 4 years, he became close to the president, indulging in lessons that helped mold his future as he stepped in as the CEO for Haven for Hope.
We all learned so much from him. Duty and service are more important than self. It's never too late to do the right thing. Competitors are our opponents and are not our enemy.
A man with a sense of humor that deeply cared about his staff even after he left the office.
We get a delivery at our house, and it's a letter to my daughter saying, "Welcome to the world."
A president, he says, left behind a legacy of dignity and morals, who he says stood up for former President Barack Obama when he heard people at Texas A&M University plan to boo him while on stage.
And he says, I need all of you to whoop up because we are not booing our president this afternoon. We're going to be the cheerleaders for him because his success is our success.
You heard that there. His success is our success. Now, Marbut says who you saw on TV was the Bush he was and the man that deeply cared about a community and his family. He plans to attend the funeral later this week. In the studio, Adi Guajardo, Ken's 5 Eyewitness News.